Courage is through knowledge, courage through good philosophy of business, of understanding process, technology, implementation, and all the aspects that go into it.
Welcome to Long-Term Thinking for Business Success, a show for and by business owners. Each episode will explore how to beat the odds and create a sustainable business and the life we've dreamt of. Today's guest is Wayne Shub, the founder and managing director of BHF Technologies. Wayne founded BHF Technologies, formerly Blue H2O Filtration, on a philosophy of providing leading-edge, cost-effective products combined with outstanding service and support. The business provides filtration, clarification, and purification equipment and solutions for the water, air, and many other fluid and gas applications. BHF Technologies works with a broad range of industries throughout Australia and New Zealand. Wayne started the business 24 years ago after working in a similar industry in South Africa and migrating to Melbourne. Hi Wayne, welcome to the Long-Term Thinking for Business Success podcast, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Rick. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. As I said in my introduction, you started BHF 24 years ago. Before we dive into BHF Technologies and how you grew it from a startup to a leading business in filtration, servicing many of Australia's top companies, can you share some of your story of how you arrived in Australia and identified the market opportunity for BHF?
It goes back to probably mid-90s when things were really starting to become concerning in South Africa. A lot of waves of immigration had already taken place. And I've met what I thought is my life partner at that stage, and really starting to consider family. In a nutshell, it really wasn't a safe place in my mind to think of going to work and the kids riding the street on their bicycles. Around about 96, when I was having these thoughts, I approached the directors of the business I was working for at the time, which is largely a very similar business, almost identical to what I have here today, in that we specialized in water purification equipment, pharmaceutical turnkey water plants, which I was heading up back then, as well as representation consumable filtration, mainly pole filter product. I'd had experience across both consumable filtration in pharmaceutical, food and beverage industry, as well as sales manager at the time of the water purification equipment. And you have a very hands-on involvement across all aspects of design, engineering, sales, implementation, service, etc. At that stage, my directors, two guys, tremendous entrepreneurs and business leaders and very growth-focused mindset, they were quite taken aback by my want to leave. Like, how do you know the place? You've never been there. So there's a lot of people, friends, family already living, and I want to go and check it out, but that's where we're going. So my interest at that time was more focused, should I say, on being a part of the business, having an equity in the business. Suggested to them that I head over to Australia, go and see what the marketplace is like, and ultimately start and head up a business of doing exactly what we did there, whereby we had an equitable share in the business and they would earn money in dollars, and that was quite an attractive proposition for most South Africans then. And the discussion was that, hey, we've got a sister company over there, let's have a look to see what they're doing. They might have or not have anything in this area, particularly high purity water plants. Spoke to their managing director. As it happened, they didn't do anything in that field and welcomed a visit. And very quickly it aligned. The big breakthrough took place when I came to Melbourne. The one standout was a visit to one of their large customers, a large multinational in the biotechnologies industry. When I arrived at a meeting, an engineer there who kindly met with me to just find out what it is we offer and tell me a bit about their process. I walked into a bit of a minefield, them not knowing what situation was in, just by really understanding their process. There was an issue going down and they had just lost the distillation column, as in it had failed. It was like $1 million distillation column, which back then considerable amount of money and design and exposure for the business.
Just for context, what's the distillation column?
The distillation column is a high purity water distillation unit producing ultra pure water for injection for the pharmaceutical manufacturing process. So this water plant had cracked, as in iron in a kettle, and the kettle corrodes and it cracks. So this hot distillation plant had cracked. I asked them what was going on at the time, and they understood that to be an issue relating to their feed water, which was purified water from a deionization column, where they felt or they believed that the deionization plant was at the end of its life and it was no longer producing a quality specification. As it happened, I was specializing in that area, and I'd actually just written an article in South Africa for a high purity water treatment for high pressure boilers. I proceeded to pull out a journal article and show the gentleman what my article and what it was about. And I think there was a sudden realization that, hold on, I'm talking to somebody who might have shed some light on this. Long story short was that pointed out why I thought there was a flaw in their design, in their thinking, just to replace the column. It was a particular contaminant that was not going to be any better with a new plant. I got to the office the next morning in Cheltenham, and the managing director was waiting at the door for me to walk through. And how did your meeting go yesterday? And I said, oh, it was actually pretty informative, pretty useful. He said, well, I'm not sure what you said to them, but they're actually all waiting for you for a meeting today. We need to get you back there pretty urgently. And there's obviously things that you said that touched home, and there's other people that want to meet. Got back in the car, went over, walked into a boardroom, and there were probably 20 people around this board table waiting for me. Can you tell us your findings and your recommendation for what you saw yesterday? Fast forward that, I ended up extending the trip, redesigning that system, and turned around a $1.5 million order for a new water plant once they understood the technology was flawed and needed to move to a membrane treatment system. That was quite an awakening. It was something unforeseen, so much so that I got back to South Africa and they asked me to basically pack up and return to Australia to go and help manage and sort out the situation. I said, that's great, but my wife's coming with me. We've got to go and have a look at our new home and see what the lie of the land. And as soon as I arrived back, I found out that they had purchased the company that I work for in South Africa.
And just to clear that, the South African company, your employer, had purchased Australian company.
Sorry, the Australian company, turns out they had not experienced this before, where an international visitor comes out this and had instant success. Something like this usually takes quite some time to roll out the technologies and succeed in that line of business. So that obviously accelerated discussions. I'm thinking I'm heading over and there's an opportunity to be a part, to have some sort of equity and directorship in a business in Australia. It turns out the Australian and the international company that owned the Australian company had actually already agreed to buy the South African company, the business that I work for. And I was told that we've bought the company and we're going to bring you over and set you up, and we want you to continue and hit the ground running and keep going. I got to arrive in Australia, had a job, get into the corporate world in water treatment, water purification, and I continued in that position for about 18 months. The corporate world in Australia I found to be very different, very impersonal, them and us. I just remember coming home one day and saying to my wife, I can see the rate of growth of this company and the future direction. There's already signs of the world moving towards acquisitions, particularly in the water space. I'm betting that there's going to be a greater chance of this company being taken over and some acquisition leading to a change of the business, a demise of our water division, or whatever the case might be. But I can see I'm going to be 45 years old and I'm left looking for a job. I'm not going to let that happen. I'm going to back myself, because one thing I could see happening here in Australia is a gross lack of true service. Now, I'm really referring to this from business in South Africa. There's an incredible work ethic and work philosophy. The serviceability and so many aspects of delivery were just, in my opinion, lacking. And there was a massive opportunity that I could see. So I began the exercise of starting up on my own and working a model to start Blue H2O. That was the start up in September 2000, nearly 24 years ago.
Congrats. Just to understand the timing, How long after you graduated and joined the South African firm were you coming to Australia?
From 91 to December 98, which was basically 8 years.
Right, so
And then another year and a half over here with the same company, just a parent company.
the reason I was asking that, so you were probably just under or around 30 when you walked into this meeting with 20 executives who I'm sure were all older than you.
Generally, yes, I was 28 at the time. And yes, certainly my senior. It was quite a daunting meeting, I should say.
Well, you weren't prepared for it because you didn't know it was going to happen. Where does the courage of being able to walk into that room, stand your ground, and obviously present what was a fantastic solution?
Courage is an interesting point, an interesting way of putting it, because it's that same courage where what we practice in the business today. Courage is through knowledge, courage through good philosophy of business, of understanding process, technology, implementation, and all the aspects that go into it. Once you look past the room and the faces in the room, really it's just about clear insight into what's going on in their process. And that's an area that I specialized in at that time. It was a sensitive subject, the particular iron. And I happened to be very involved, particularly because we were leaders in that field in South Africa. We were leaders in researching and understanding membrane technologies and bringing them into the pharmaceutical industry. It's all about experience, having been implemented, having operated the system, giving them comforts of operating life, longevity, issues, cleaning, automation.
But what I am interested, and I imagine this will come through in other questions, is the courage to back yourself. So in the first meeting, you had the article, the research paper you'd drafted, you were confident to pull that out, you were confident in the next day. And as you said earlier, you backed yourself to start BHF Technologies. So I imagine that theme of the courage to back yourself and stand with strength on your own 2 feet is something that's been common throughout your career.
Interesting to try and cast your mind back 25 years. It actually is pretty clear to me because that courage that you're referring to probably came from the 2 directors that I worked for that built us up, that gave us that clarity and that platform to understand what we did. We were market leaders in how we maintained our edge as market leaders through knowledge, through the right people, through technology. The courage was probably built on a platform that in South Africa, it was very rare that we would lose a tender. We absolutely owned the industry.
One other point that I take away from that is the fact that marketing today is what marketing was 25 years ago. You had a paper that you submitted. It was obviously more research than marketing driven, but that concept of having content so a business is clear, has a position and a considered approach to things that then forms the basis of how you talk to clients. And that still is the foundation of marketing today, even though today there's a whole industry around content marketing, but that premise of being clear with who you're trying to talk to and what the message is the core of what we try to do with our clients.
The large multinational I would have experienced at the time was a process of understanding, of questioning and understanding what they're trying to achieve to get to that end goal. Ultimately, that system was custom designed to meet exactly their requirements. So there's no off-the-shelf anything. It's very much the philosophy on which BHF is being founded on and prides itself in today, in truly listening, understanding, questioning, and getting to the bottom of the customer's requirement to ensure that the solution is fit for purpose. It makes sense.
That's great. Just to jump back a little bit and for the context for the listener, just to understand a little bit more about BHF, what's the change you want to make, or to put that another way, what's the vision you're trying to deliver? And you've talked a lot about the service approach, but really the more around the product as well as the service perspective. And who are your ideal customers?
The vision and the impact, if you like, that we believe in and we live by today is arguably no different to what it was then. One of the first things we educate and train our staff, particularly our sales staff, is a principle that I derived back in the early 2000s called 333. To tell somebody that we're good, we listen, or we have good service is a challenge of recognition, a challenge that you're going to be around. What you soon find out, and when you do some research anyway, there's a great history of business and issues in Australia with startups and companies coming in, placing equipment that become very expensive doorstops because there's no local support. So there's a natural reluctance for startups. The direct answer to your question is the vision of truly listening, deliver service. Our definition of service is probably a 35-point strategic service plan, of which not one includes selling. Having a suitable stock handling program, stock management program, ensuring operators are appropriately trained, being available for brainstorming, troubleshooting, writing up processing documents, attending site technical meetings, collaborating with their engineer. As I say, a 35-point plan of how we could service the customers. The vision is that we live by a true service strategy that empowers our go-to people, go-to company, that people are not being sold to. Professional sales starts with well-qualified, educated, trained people out in the marketplace representing our product. We have several engineers, chemists, metallurgists representing as account managers or business development managers. And most of the time, they're very involved in the process itself, being part of the customer's operating process, design team, management meetings, technical review meetings, servicing, whatever the case might be. The vision then remains what it is today. All stages of our service, our sales, our logistics, our procurement, our financial management, our engineering, our project management, our housing, and reviewing that on a regular basis to meet with the current demands in the climate, which certainly proved to be a successful model that was proven itself during COVID, where the market couldn't go out and couldn't have salespeople or competitors arriving at site offering a solution. And that really revealed the strength of the dependability on, or the go-to factor to help manufacturing business, especially food, beverage, pharmaceutical.
You mentioned then the 333 principle, but you didn't actually say what the principle is.
333 was a principle that looking for recognition, trying to get momentum. There's no response. There's no real urgency and there's no taking you seriously. What I soon figured out is that 333 refers to visiting 30 customers 3 times in 3 months. We've got to go and start expanding the market, hence the quantity. 3 times, I found people not taking you seriously. The second time, people asked for a solution. And it was pretty common then, as it is today, that people just don't get back to you. Being present in an environment 3 times, but the second time people are, good to see you back. But the third time they take you seriously. Within 3 months is important that it's a relatively rapid uptake of that awareness, urgency, taking it seriously. 333 is just a simple principle. We would refer to an account or a territory or region saying, we need to do the 333 in that area. It's a very strong basis of this business.
And I love the accountability aspect to it, that you can actually check whether your team's living that principle very easily by their behaviours and actions. So it's really manageable within the business. I find often the business owners forget to celebrate our achievements. We're so focused on the next thing, we don't take a moment to stop and think about our wins. So in thinking about the success you've had with BHF Technologies over the last 24 years, what are you most proud of and why?
Biggest wins for me was ultimately success on day one with the largest system account design and order I had seen to date. The first success out of that one was actually a JV that I did with that company. I went off to the banks to start the business, and I quickly ran into a brick wall there because there was one simple philosophy from the banks. You're a startup, love your business concept. If you're around in 5 years' time, come and see us. So, okay, now I'm putting systems, there's capital equipment, there's procurement taking place. How's this going to be funded? Success was developing a JV with my previous company. I was a specialist in the industry. I am a specialist. There were various leads and designs taking place that I felt I wanted to manage and control them, and we could do this in a collaborative 50-50 with their engineering support. And I had already set up local fabrication, manufacturing in Australia, and I had some of the market contacts that we could continue nurturing this. So I did that, and that allowed me to get traction in momentum of the business as a startup, number one, and that recognition that I was referring to. but also some cash in to start funding the capital of this business. That was certainly a first real success. Breaking through that, winning the Schweppes contract in 2003 and getting us through our first $1 million was a huge milestone. I'd say the next major one was achieving ISO accreditation in 2017, which gave us a platform on which it was just a far greater quality and awareness of our business. But I dare say that FY19 was a massive year of bringing together a combination of system technologies and growth through some very large consumable accounts that saw us growing 72% in 1 year. That was a pretty significant milestone in the history of BHF.
It's a typical example of, at that point, would have been 17 years to an overnight success.
Certainly. I always relate the fact that it took me 8 years to break even. What my board members refer to, exactly what you say, a 23-year overnight success.
Fundamentally, it sounds like the business hasn't changed at its core since you started it. But I expect your role as managing director has changed fundamentally. Can you tell us how your role has changed over the last few years and what your top priorities are today?
The role has changed in as much as I've removed myself from working in the business to a large extent, or majority of my time. I would oversee the project systems development, design, major approval stages of the development of our system. And the large percentage of my time is working on the development of the management within the business to ensure management across all sectors, projects, consumables, systems, but in finance, procurement, warehousing, logistics. The central management of all of that through appointing a general manager to the business to help consolidate and pull this all together, where I'm ideally having a one-stop discussion report that we are ultimately leading to preparing that for just board meetings. My focus is in extracting myself from the business to the majority of the time where all management processes, practices, systems, standards are in place, that I could attend weekly discussions, monthly management, or quarterly board meetings.
Every founder's dream is to be the chair of the business, oversee the business, and get out of the day-to-day operational side of it. Well, it sounds like you were pretty involved operationally up until fairly recently, and then this shift in building a management team and creating, you're a private company, so creating a board, etc. What's driven that shift in your role to change your focus from day-to-day operations to really driving the strategic future of the company?
The fact of the matter is 23 years of intense startup at home in my home office, working 15 hours a day. It was a pretty intense process, and that leads to the growth, and the growth leads to people and people issues and the usual typical business owner stuff. I've had a few setbacks over the last 5 or so years, different health and various things in it. It's just a greater realization for my wanting to do other things as well as maintain the growth of the business. I have aspirations to travel. I want to look at other business ventures outside of what we do that I don't need to be distracted. I don't need time to attend to other things outside of that. But I also want to ease off and do things that I want to do outside of work, because I want to just really free up my time to firstly work out some of those things, some of those priorities that I want to attend to, and enjoy myself. You can't take it with you. I'm not going to fall victim to working out my days and regretting not doing something about it earlier.
Of creating the opportunity to have that. There are many business owners our age and older and younger that would be enviable of the opportunity you've created for yourself. So thank you for sharing that. Just to follow on, despite all the careful planning we do for our businesses, unexpected things always seem to happen, where I'd love to understand, when you look back at the past 24 years of building BHF Technologies, I'm curious to know if there's something that really caught you surprise, or a challenge or an opportunity that you didn't expect to come down the pipe that you could take an opportunity to leverage. So if there was something like that, what was it, and how did you adjust or change the business to take up that opportunity or address the challenge?
Well, as I said earlier, when you face the banks saying to you, tough luck, come back in 5 years' time, you're either going to stop going down that road or you look to other avenues, whether it's personal loans, or in my case, doing JV, and largely getting the industry through deposits to fund a project and prop up the business. Fighting the issue of recognition and proving yourself as a valued supplier. I've often asked the question and think to myself, I don't know if I was stupid or ignorant, but blind to the type of work and resistance that lies ahead. I think people see through that, though. Really, it's focused on solution, focused on delivery. I think, that stands out, and you can iron that out. Competing with international in a space with the size of the business, companies in this technology actually in that $1-2 million space, they just get their local sort of network happening, but beyond that, it's breaking down the internationals. And that for me is the business philosophy that needs the buy-in at the highest level and roll out when you're dealing across large territories. Challenges through the business are plenty. Financial challenges are always a headache, getting the banks on board and creating bridging finance and the like. I think every business owner will agree that staff generally stands out there as our number one, keeping people happy, finding the right people. Just referred to this last week, actually, as probably my biggest go-to was subscribing to Richard Branson's Losing My Virginity. He was very clear about his approach to business in investing in his people. Your people are your business. We have people here 20 years, 17 years, 15, 14, a few over 10, and we're very proud of that. And that's building a business as an enjoyable workplace is probably the biggest challenge. I find delight in that because I knew what it was like to work at a place that you didn't want to be at. To have to wake up to that was no pleasure. So it's always a challenge. It's certainly a focus in our management meetings. How do we maintain the health and well-being and enjoyment in our staff? Maintaining growth, that's always a challenge in itself. We've got to be ahead of the curve, and for us, it's a time to invest in our next level marketing campaign. We try lots of things, Rick. I'd say to you this, there's an element of luck involved in it. You can try hard, you can do your best. Some of it does come down to good fortune.
Look, I agree with that completely. There's a huge amount of luck within business, but the skill is to be able to leverage that luck and not just to let it go past. You'd like to step back a little bit to talk about the team. And in the context of that, so today, your head office is in Melbourne, you've got offices in Sydney, Adelaide, and New Zealand. And I'm sure with all those offices, maintaining culture across them is a real challenge. Core of building a team is creating trust and accountability so that they are an effective team. Can you share your approach to how you build that trust and accountability with your team members across the multiple offices and staff on site? So between all these various places, you often don't get to see the people that you're trying to keep motivated and hold accountable. So what is it that you do besides just talking about it, your management team, to maintain that level of engagement?
It starts with recruitment based on a core philosophy ahead of your job criteria performance list. The recruit through good attitude, through trying to find the right people. I reckon you can train anybody to do almost anything. Even the right attitude, the right approach, good business ethic, good disciplines, well-organized people. The clear common denominator for what we have today is sharing an insight and being vulnerable and honest about the story of who you are and how you transact and what your core cultures are, is something that touches home very nicely to the right people, if that's what you're looking for. I often find the interview process in itself typically too mundane and potentially not being able to tap in. So talking about the story and your own story and your own people and what you're looking for in people removes the CV. It removes people telling you how good they are and taps into what they're trying to achieve. What is it that makes you tick in the workplace? It's getting the job done and making sure people are accountable. So getting senior people and management who absolutely have to have those attributes. They are my go-to. They live the core philosophy of the business. They marvel in the fact that their people do that. And one of those simple attributes is people are given so much freedom. There's lots of rope to be flexible and do what you like, but you can hang yourself. You need to have very clear guidelines and communication. I don't think we've ever had a timesheet in the business in nearly 24 years. It's the actions, it's the communication, it's the follow-up emails, it's the levels of design, the levels of offer, the timely response, quality information, etc. There's so many aspects. And when people see how that works and how effective it is, and they learn about 333 and they see the traction involved in that and they get the support, Teamwork is a huge element to this. There's no individual in this business that could stand out, and we can't, because we need the depth. If somebody goes on holiday and takes leave, or something unfortunate happens, we need to know there's depth in that role, their customer, or whatever the case might be. So there's a lot of training across roles for that reason. People understand that and are willing to partake and be a support to their colleague as they would want them to be for them. It's a pretty complex topic and something we live by very strongly.
Is there anything you can share from the recruitment process that you use to identify the values? Where you mentioned vulnerability, is there something that, is there a go-to question you have or a technique that you use to try to bring out the vulnerability of the people, to see how open they are to sharing and then being mentored and developed within the business?
There's nothing that comes to mind as a go-to question. It's probably the live discussion that plays out, that presents for what that person is, for what they're doing. It either comes about naturally or perhaps through a second or third interview. A recent one we had a couple of weeks ago, I saw great potential, but I needed to see how that person would perform under pressure. And we invited her to spend 3/4 of a day with us, going through key aspects of that role and monitoring and doing the work with us live. We're keen, we want you. I just need to see how you respond, because it's a potentially pressurized role where there's sudden changes and we've got to react in large and a lot of impactful work that needs to be put aside. She rose to the challenge and turned out to be a pretty good candidate. On that basis, I could see the personality. I could see elements of nervousness, of good traits, of just good thinking, good logic. It's like, I'm looking for somebody that thinks on their feet. We need to go through that process to see who the person is, what they're about, what makes them tick. A little bit of insight into their own life and what they're looking for.
Which again goes back to who you are, and all the way back to that story when you were in front of this 20 people and you could deal with the change and the challenge that was thrown at you very comfortably. But just to go a completely different direction, and you're an engineer and you're an engineering-based business, so I expect there's lots of examples you could use to reference my next question, but I'll push you to think of one that's been the most impactful. Often it's said that creating systems and processes is a key reason for a business's success over an extended period of time. Could you think about a system or process, and you've already alluded to a number in your business, but one that's really had a significant impact on the success and enabled you to scale the business to, as we said, 24 years, 20 odd staff, etc. So is there a process or system that you've implemented that has allowed you to enable that growth?
There's a few real fundamental impacts that have taken place over time, and one of them is a stock management system, which we've always applied and maintained and grown through the different regions, because a lot of the industry requires local stock holding to supply. And if you can't respond very quickly, they don't have the processes and response time to wait out delays and lead time. One particular wine bottling company, probably 7 or 8 years ago, was in the McLaren Vale region. They were a key target account, running several $100,000 a year of filtration. They were interested, but never really came through with our business, never eventuated, until a point in time where, with acquisition of companies from our international competitors, the multinationals, they were consolidating and pulled stock holding out of South Australia. At that point, we already had stock holding, we ramped it up, and just that local strength in stock holding turned that entire account around. Huge pillar of this business is very involved stock holding programs with large multinationals and a lot of Australia's blue chip companies. There is one standout system that I developed which has had a significant impact, and that is in the wine industry. That same company called me in about 5 years ago to explain to me that their family had been through some hardships because their process of bottling wine was a very manual intensive process. 3 brothers in the business were at work at early hours in the morning. They would hang around till evening, not seeing their kids growing up, their family. It took a real toll. One of them even got divorced as a result of the whole pressure. They called me in to see if I could help automate their process and develop an automated filtration system. It took about 6 months, multiple trips to Adelaide, working out every step of changing every valve, because their dream, their vision is they want to sit on the veranda on their deck on a Sunday afternoon, having their barbie, drinking wine while their kids are playing. If necessary, open the laptop and prepare the lines for Monday morning. 6 months later, the process design was validated. We built the system, supplied their first fully automated wine filtration system, and subsequently won an award in partnership with them and the Wine Industry Suppliers Association for our engineering award in the wine industry. So that was a major milestone. Since then, the large wine bottling houses of Australia aligned themselves with that technology, and we're rolling out and have since won further awards from WISA for the same technology.
Congratulations. You are an engineer at heart, after all. Personally, the hardest lesson is one that I need to learn multiple times, often something that I revisit a few times. For example, I continually struggle with the need to fill a seat versus continuing searching for the right person. Thinking back over the 24 years of running your business, is there a hard lesson that you've had to learn and possibly relearn, and how has that impacted the business?
If I were to think of a lesson that I'm always trying to remind myself, and that is, don't design business around the person. People need to fit in. I've been accused of molding positions too many times and being too generous, and that's left us with some sticky situation. But I should put a big but in there. Having said that, there's a good reason for that we spoke about earlier, and that is the people aspect of the business. Allow people to do what they're good at doing. Allow them the freedom to take it in a direction where they know how to do it in their own way and their style. That does ultimately lead to that grey line, or that area of people doing things and not doing things that arguably should be doing, but allowing the business to be molded around the individual. There's a lot of risk in that.
My final question, I'm sure you can appreciate that a great strategy is focused on the most impactful activities, and part of that might be managing risk. Our experience has shown that at any point, a company can only effectively work on a finite number of internal priorities, typically 3 or 4, if that many. Can you talk about 1 or 2 of your current strategic initiatives? And I'm less interested in the specifics of the initiative, but more what was going on in the business and the decision process you used to select those priorities, given I'm sure there are lots of different things you could be doing.
Rick, the first one that comes to mind is my current situation, and that is to build up full independence in the management teams, where people are carrying out all the values of the business, implementing and operating all the operating systems, whilst understanding the risk elements of all of that. And as soon as I have a comfortable level of that being attended to, that's my point of extraction, of my stepping back, allow them to nurture and develop the business in a new direction in that role. That initiative feeds into a number of high level parameters, and that is, it's time for payback. People that have helped me take the business 15, 20 years in, they deserve something more than another salary check. And I have invested in that. The fruits of that need to come out in the future growth of the business. While I've referred to myself as removing myself or extracting, one of those activities would really be to help look at growth outside of the traditional growth of the business, bring on funding, whatever the case might be, to facilitate a bigger outlook whilst they're maintaining the focus on, if you like, generic growth.
A great spot to end, because it's testament to something that's come through the whole conversation, is your commitment and dedication to bringing great people around you, supporting them and giving them the opportunity. And as you've said, you've got long-term tenureship with some of your employees, and now your opportunity to give back to them. Congratulations. An overnight success in 24 years. And Wayne, as I said, that was my final question. So thank you for allowing us to dive into BHF Technologies and for sharing your experiences and lessons. And I really do look forward to watching from the inside the continuing success of your business.
Thanks, Rick. I look forward to working with you too. And I hope that some of this might even be useful to somebody out there.
No doubt it will be useful to many people out there, and for my team as well. So thank you again.